And we are live with our first episode of DannLaw VS Fraud.
Yay.
Well, good afternoon to the Facebook universe. My name is Brian Flick. I'm one of the partners here at DannLaw, and I am so excited to be on the pilot inaugural flagship episode of our DannLaw VS Fraud podcast with two of my favorite people in the world, not just because I work with them, but two of the best consumer protection attorneys I think anybody around the country could find. To my left corner is Marita Ramirez. And Marita, I'll let you introduce yourself in a second. And to my other is the man, the myth, the legend, Brent Snyder. So with this podcast, we're going to give you a little bit of background. This is, episode 1. We decided to launch this podcast about 6 weeks ago, 8 weeks ago, actually. And the reason is, we talk amongst ourselves a lot about the cases. And the reason you're going to see Marita, Brent, myself, and Mark, and it'll be a rotating cast of characters moving forward between the four of us, is we all work on these cases together, and especially the three of us that you see right now. But, we wanted to talk about this and talk about fraud because it's something we're seeing. Big F fraud, which we'll get into, little f fraud, but we are getting deluged on a daily basis by calls from people all over the country, primarily in Ohio, in the Midwest, in New Jersey, in New York, in Florida. And we wanted to just get out there and talk about it. I've been a lawyer for 19 years, a partner here, going on over 10. I handle a lot of our class action work. I actually, have the pleasure of not necessarily being the boss of, but working with Marita and Brent, running our consumer protection practice that has to do with everything but real estate. And, we help hundreds of consumers every month, every year, feels like every week, if not every month anymore. But that's a little bit about me. Marita, a little bit about you.
Yes, and Brian is being very humble. He is definitely the boss, as he should be. I am learning a lot from him. I've not been practicing as long as Brian or Brent. I have been practicing for I don't even know what year this is anymore. 5 years or less at this point, 4 years. And before I even became an attorney, I was actually a paralegal in criminal defense for over 10 years. So I came from this background of criminal defense, and then Mark and Brian took a chance on me to come in and kind of help them out in the consumer department. Civil law has been a completely different world than criminal defense, but I love it. It's absolutely where I want to be, and I'm so happy to be here. But I, just to kind of piggyback on what Brian was saying, I fully agree. Fraud is something that is just so prevalent right now, and that's definitely one of the reasons why we wanted to just kind of start this podcast and have a dialogue, an open dialogue about what is happening, what's going on with you. I'm sure if you are not experiencing fraud yourself, you probably know someone who is. So I'm really hoping that this podcast will kind of shed some light about fraud in a legal sense and what you can do about it. Take it away, Brent.
Thanks, Marita. And to Brian's credit as well, I think he's the glue that keeps all this together, to be honest. And pretty decent for a boss, and I can say that after being my own boss for 16 years and going back in with other groups of people. So probably a better boss than I was for myself, to be honest. I'm Brent Snyder. I've been practicing this year, 25 years in November. I cannot believe that. I spent the last 23 of it practicing in Tennessee, which I still do. But then I got licensed in Ohio and moved outside of Cincinnati and came on board with this group. My whole background has been consumer rights and individual consumer bankruptcy, small business bankruptcy, and small business type issues as well. So this has kind of been my passion for the last quarter century, helping people out and sticking up for the little guys. Really, that's kind of how I got into this. Was and you know, we talk about fraud, and I think it's great that we're doing this as well, because I mean, every single day, Brian and Marita and myself, we get emails, I mean, that run the gamut of people being taken advantage of. I mean, I can tell you just this week, I've had romance scams. I've had somebody that got sold fake vending machines, who's probably somebody from Nigeria or some other African country, or probably Eastern Europe. So, I mean, it runs the gamut. Everything from car dealerships purposely, selling a junk used car, to people trying to, scam you out of money. So, I mean, it really runs the gamut, and I think that kind of goes into the point of differentiating between what's fraud, what's negligence, and I think Marita could do a pretty good job explaining that. But basically, fraud is intentional. I mean, it's somebody, right? I mean, fraud is somebody knows what they're doing is straight up wrong, and they're using it for their own, pecuniary gain. I can't pronounce that properly. Whereas negligence could be somebody just, screwed up, should have known better, was sloppy. There's a fine line, of course, and as lawyers, that sometimes our job is to help people differentiate between the two, which I think is why people have a good knowledge of what those differences are.
We have a
Before we get into, sorry.
No, you're totally good. We have a question in the live stream.
Yay.
All right. Well, we'll get to that question. Before I get into the questions, we've got, of course, we're lawyers. We're going to give you the lawyer disclaimer. This is a podcast with lawyers. We're out here. Nothing we're going to say here, please do not construe anything we're saying as legal advice. But with that said, as you have questions, please, put them in the chat, or also, on our Facebook page, feel free. You've got that messenger link. I will tell you, I'm one of the people who administers that when you're talking to DannLaw, you're talking to me, or you're talking to Mark, and usually it's me. We're always happy to chat that way, or go to our website, go to DannLaw.com and fill out an intake on our inquiry. We're always happy to talk to you. So, Ava, you said we have a question.
Yes,
what
we
is
do.
it?
So my name is Ava. I'm our technical producer here. I'll basically be able to communicate with chat and help you guys get connected with our wonderful attorneys here. And you can also call us at 216-373-0539. You very well may end up speaking to me, and I can also get you connected with your attorneys. But we have a question from Scott Schuller. They ask, do we have a PUA update? Don't know if we can tell, but.
Well, Scott, I was kind of figuring this question would come up sometime during any of these podcasts or when we go live. What I can tell you, and what Scott is asking about PUA, I'll give the brief synopsis. PUA is the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance, but in the office and in the court, we call it the Federal Pandemic Unemployment Compensation, FPUC. The case is Candy Bowling, or State ex-rel Candy Bowling versus Mike DeWine in his capacity as governor. And here's where the case is. Next Wednesday, May 20th at 9 o'clock, there are oral arguments in front of the Ohio Supreme Court on the state's appeal of the 10th District's decision that affirmed the summary judgment that our firm was granted in the Franklin County Court of Common Pleas, ordering Mike DeWine to ask the Department of Labor to go get the benefit, and if the benefit is available, and transfer that to the state of Ohio. The state has appealed that to the 10th District and lost. The Supreme Court has decided to hear the issue. The oral arguments are next Wednesday. We will share live stream. A frequent visitor probably to this podcast, you'll get to know Andy Engel, one of the other attorneys in our office. Andy will be doing the oral argument. We will post the live stream. We encourage everybody to go watch it. It's on the Ohio channel. We have no timetable after argument and as to how long it will take for the court to rule. When the court rules, we will certainly let everyone know via social media, via every outreach that we have, because this fight has been a long fight. It is hopefully coming to conclusion, but we just don't know at this point. We thank all of you for your questions, your support. We know how important this money is, quite frankly, and we want it to come to the people of the state of Ohio, the FPUC recipients, as it was supposed to.
Thank you very much.
All right.
So back to fraud.
So back to fraud. Right, I know you said you were a criminal. You did criminal, as did I. Fun fact. My third year of law school. But yeah, fun fact. Third year of law school, I was a prosecutor. I worked for the Lima City Prosecutor's Office for a year. I got to handle minor misdemeanor cases as a limited practice, and also assist the city prosecutors in almost all their other criminal cases. And I got to do two DUIs on tractors and one DUI on a golf cart.
I am
it was
jealous.
a fun year, but you and I haven't done criminal law since. But there's a big difference. I mean, we're talking fraud here, but given your criminal background, tell a little bit of context. What's the difference between criminal fraud, civil fraud?
So, well, I mean, again, all of this is we're kind of like fine line, right? Really, the difference is criminal fraud, you are being charged by the state. Civil fraud, someone's trying to, intentionally take money from you, and rather than, there being criminal charges filed against them, you are taking them to court. You yourself are suing them to try to get some recovery for the what you were defrauded of. I think that being the biggest difference that I see, unless you guys see anything different there, is really when you think about it, sometimes the state decides not to press charges for whatever reason. Sometimes it is, they don't feel like there's enough evidence, or, XYZ, who knows why, but it's out of your hands. So if you were a victim of fraud and you're hoping that the state brings charges, you go and you talk to the prosecutor's office and they decide, yeah, we're not going to press charges for whatever reason. Instead of feeling like you don't have options, you do. That's where, you would kind of jump from the criminal world into civil, and you would be able to explore whether there were recovery options for you under, or with the civil lawsuit. I hope, did that answer your question, Brian?
That pretty much
Sometimes I
does
just start
answer my
talking
question.
and I have no idea even what I'm saying.
So, go ahead, Brent.
My internet froze up for a second or two there, but thank God it started working again. So Marina, let me ask you a question about that. So let's say the DA or whatever does prosecute the quote fraudster, for lack of a better term, in criminal court. Can I go after him civilly as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, both can happen simultaneously. Something to keep in mind, though, is you're not able to collect, restitution, say, which is essentially like recovery in the criminal world. The fraudster, if they were convicted, could potentially, have a judgment that included restitution, where they have to pay you back for whatever they defrauded you. Now, if that were ordered as part of the conviction, then you would not be able to recover that in the civil lawsuit, if that makes sense. So if the restitution was for the full amount that you were defrauded, then you're not going to be able to then get that same recovery in a civil lawsuit. You don't get it twice. As fun as that would be, you do not get it twice.
Well, and I think it's really important, one of the good transition points is a lot of the people that we speak with, very generally, who are the victims of different kinds of frauds, which I want to talk, we're going to keep this podcast a little bit short due to some time constraints, but a lot of the people we talk to that are victims of a fraud like identity theft, of phishing, generally one of the first things they do is go to the police and their local police, which we do encourage you to do for a variety of reasons that we're going to get into in future podcasts. But the police officers generally may take the report, but say there's nothing we can do. This is a civil matter. If you get yourself into that situation, or you know a friend or a loved one who is, and they talk to you about it, and they say, yes, I called the police started to do something, but they said this is a civil matter, work to contact a law firm like ours, because even though we may not be able to help immediately, knowing what your rights are, and rather than waiting for the criminal process to wait out sometimes, waiting for those DAs or prosecuting attorneys in Ohio to make that decision, you don't want to let the time becomes a factor. And, very generally in the limited time we have today, the other thing we wanted to talk about, something unfortunately near and dear to our hearts, we're talking about fraud, the kinds of fraud that you see, we're talking, 50,000 foot here, but fraud, big F, little f, what are you looking for? What might be fraud? Spam. You get a phishing email. You get a phishing text that says you have a package waiting for you from UPS. Click here. Or you get an email that says, you have a package, send me money. Hey, click this link. Or more commonly, you're getting a call out of the blue saying this is the police from an unknown number. If you're getting those calls, take a breath. I know it's scary, but if you do know someone who's going through that, again, don't hesitate to reach out to us and we can talk about it.
We have a question in the chat. Ian Miller asks, so is fraud essentially being scammed?
Yes, that's one part of fraud. And scam is a huge one. And actually one of the reasons why we decided to start this podcast, because scams are kind of running rampant, and there are many different scams as well. Like there are romance scams. There are what I just recently learned, something called pig butchering scams. I was certainly curious about where the pig butchering came from, and because I'm such a nerd, I decided to kind of research, and I can talk about that in future podcasts as well, given the time. Really interesting where that kind of term came from. But there are what scams are called pig butchering scams. There, with AI being a thing now, there is so much AI-driven fraud happening, and a lot of that does take in the form of scams. But that's not the only way that necessarily you can be defrauded. Someone identity theft, for instance, is not always in the form of a scam. It could just be that someone picked up your driver's license, or some debit card or a credit card that you had left, or had somewhere inadvertently, and they got a hold of it, and now they have made all kinds of fraudulent charges on your card. I mean, that's still fraud, and that's not necessarily a scam. So I hope, does that answer the question? I hope so.
I hope so.
I think it does.
Pretty good explanation. I mean, I think a scam involves there has to be an interaction between the two parties, where fraud doesn't necessarily have to have a personal interaction.
Right.
Yeah.
I think an easier way, if scam helps you think of, the umbrella of, I've been had, I've been duped. I don't understand what's going on. Somebody didn't tell me something, and I really relied upon that to do something, that as well. And, we don't want to be a downer in our first episode, but certainly a lot of the scams related to the pig butchering concept, we have actual cases right now that are horror stories, that we can't share all of it, but we can give you some generalities. but we're not. We're going to talk about that in later episodes. You know, for today, this is kind of a good stopping point. We wanted to keep this one short because of time constraints, unfortunately, but we hope and we thank you. You know, all of you are on Facebook Live. Thank you for the questions. Tell your friends. On behalf of the firm, you know, this podcast, we're going to try and do it every week around this time. And, you know, we hope that this will be one of a few podcasts that the firm has that we're going to be doing live, because we want to hear from you. And more importantly, we want more and more and more people out there on the interwebs and out there on the World Wide Webs to know about consumer issues. That's another thing that drives us is, you know, you have help. You have places to go. You have a resource. So thank you all for your time. Thank you for putting up with us for 20 minutes on DannLaw v Fraud, the pilot episode. We promise to do better the next time. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.